Hello there, my name's Paul Thomas Peter and I'm dying of cancer. I'm making this film because I'm doing an answer piece to two articles that went out on March 6th and 7th 2019 on the Victoria Derbyshire programme on the BBC. I thought the first of the articles made some quite good points and some good suggestions, but I have some issues with it as well. I thought the second piece was appalling. It was a hatchet job on the Hallwang Clinic in Germany. I thought it was poorly researched, badly evidenced, and just not fair on the clinic, to be honest. So I'm doing an answer piece, and this is the first of two videos where I look at the first article that went out, and I'm going to put short films of me commenting on the Victoria Derbyshire programme and dispersed in there to say what I'm going to cover in more detail in a written blog post. And I'm going to try and evidence everything that I say, not make sweeping statements, and give a bit more of a balanced view on crowdfunding this time. But actually the crowdfunding piece was actually quite good. I was quite impressed with it, but there were still a few points that I wasn't particularly happy with. Why am I doing this? Well, I have cancer. I have terminal cancer, and I was told in May 2015 to go home and die by the NHS, and I had 3 to 18 months to live. And I wasn't really happy with that, to be perfectly honest. And I was told there was no treatment options, there was nothing for me. And I actually found out there was, but I just couldn't get it in the UK. So I went to this clinic, the Hallwang Clinic, in 2017, in March 2017. I was almost dead at the time. All the before and after scans and everything are on my blog. I went there in the beginning of March, the second anniversary's just gone. Almost dead, almost unable to get up my stairs at home, couldn't go out of my house, could barely eat. Wasn't sleeping very. I was in a really poor state. I didn't think I'd make it much past April 2017, given the state that I was in. I'd lost about 4 or 5 stone as well because I couldn't eat, and I was not in a good state at all. And over the next 3 months, that clinic saved my life. I knew what treatment I was going for. Well, I knew what I wanted anyway, and I actually got a better treatment plan. I knew it was going to be expensive, but I'm older than a lot of people who go there, and so I used my personal pension to fund it, and I did a bit of crowdfunding that raised a lot of money that I didn't have to find, but in the scheme of things, it was never going to raise anywhere near what my treatment was costing. So my personal pension went on it. 3 months after I got there, well, it was actually 4 months when I had the scan. A scan showed that I was 95% clear, when in March I had tumours from my head to my foot. There were 2 in my brain, they were throughout my body, every major organ. I'm not sure they were in my heart. They said every major organ apart from the lungs and liver. There were certain, my intestines was full of them, my lymph system was full of them. I had lumps under my arms that I could grab hold of about the size of an avocado stone. I had lumps on my face, I had lumps on my body. I had lumps I couldn't see. I had lumps on my legs that I didn't know about. It was all through my body. I was in a very poor state. The scan 4 months later showed I was 95% clear. Nearly every single tumour in my body had gone. Unfortunately, I couldn't afford to carry on going to the Hallwang Clinic, not without putting my wife and I in financial straits. So I came back to the UK, brandishing my treatment plan and my incredible results. That doesn't happen in cancer treatment every day. It doesn't. And found that nobody in the medical profession or cancer research industry was in the slightest bit interested in my recovery. Well, actually, I got one positive bit of interest, and that led to treatment in Southampton at the end of 2017. I got another 4 rounds of treatment. It was never quite sure. I thought first I'd have to fund it, then we put in a funding request, and then the funding request was turned down, and then the treatments continued, and it all got a bit woolly. And but I had the treatment, and that's what, dying of cancer, that's what, and I'm fairly sure, I haven't had any treatment since the end of 2017, and I'm still alive here 2 years later with a pretty good quality of life. I had a very good quality of life for 2 years, but I'm deteriorating a bit now. And so I want to answer this. I want to give a more balanced view of the clinic, if I can. And I also want to evidence what I'm saying and take up a few points in both pieces. This is just the first piece. And just comment on what people have said, because it's okay sitting in a studio in the BBC saying things that you think people should do. It's a completely different thing when you actually try to do that and you try to put it in practice and what you've come up against. I have experience of this. I've been to that clinic. I have terminal cancer. There's no licensed treatment for my condition. It's quite rare in the UK. I've met a lot of other patients, quite a few of which are no longer with us, unfortunately. I also met their relatives, and I'm still in touch with them. And I run a UK patients group on Facebook, specifically for people from the UK going to the Hallwang Clinic. We limit it to patients who are there, because it's more of an area for us to discuss our issues, our problems, questions that we've got with other people in the same boat. It's probably a bit out of date now because I'm not current with the Hallwang Clinic, and we maybe ought to have a feeder group to it of people who are thinking of going to the Hallwang Clinic, because we restrict access to it. Well, I restrict access to it. There are a couple of admins just in case I die. And access to it is extremely tight. You have to be a patient or a close relative. So please don't go and find it and start trying to join, because I've got enough to do at the moment as it is. I don't think the clinic is perfect. I think they do quite a few things wrong. But they were the only people I could find who would treat me with treatment that I'd researched. In fact, they gave me better treatment, but treatment that I researched and thought had a reasonable chance of giving me a longer life. The chance I thought I had was 25%, which you might not think is good odds, but given your alternative is 0% and a few weeks, 25% is worth a punt, and that's what we did at the time. We went and took a punt. We had a go, and we actually said if it hasn't started, they said it might take 6 weeks to start working, and they said if it doesn't start working after we've been twice, because it was every 3 weeks, and we haven't seen any improvement, we're not going to continue sending them money, and we're not going to go because it isn't working. And it actually started working in 3 weeks. So even for a Yorkshireman, I was quite happy to send them the money every time. Although the better I got, the less I liked it. But that's the way of the world, isn't it? I wouldn't have needed my pension if I hadn't have gone there. So I want to give a more balanced view of the Hallwang Clinic, what it does. I'll discuss it. I'll discuss some of the points here. I'm just going to comment here all the way through, so that you can see what I'm going to pick up in the blog. So you can watch this, get the gist of what I'm saying, and ignore all my boring words. But the alternative is listen to me droning on, and that's the way of things. So I'm just going to consult my notes, because I can talk about this for hours, as many of my friends already know, to the point where they avoid me in the street. So as I said, you can watch this, get the gist of what I'm going to take a bit further, and then look at the detail and the evidence I use to back up what I say in the blog post. I'm aware this is going to upset people. I've contacted a lot of either ex or current patients over the last week or so, and I've contacted a lot of the relatives of people who've since passed away who I knew when they were there, and I've asked permission to either talk about them or give their opinions, because I don't want the whole thing to just be about me. I want it to be as balanced as I can. Some have said yes, some have said no, they don't want it raking up anymore. Some have given me comments, some haven't. I have actually been contacted by a person who is in one of these pieces, I forget which, he might be in both, who is really not happy with the way he's been represented. In fact, I've been contacted by two, because some guy's testimonial was used without his permission. He'd actually refused to be in the programme. And there's a couple of people featured on the programme. I don't know everyone. You didn't. People's visits didn't coincide that often. I don't know everyone, but I do know a couple, and the odd one has completely misrepresented their story and blamed everything on the clinic, when actually they're not that to blame. But you'll see as I go through both pieces. This is just the first one. Watch this, read the blog. Watch the second one, and I'll comment on that. Read the blog. The second one is the one I'm least happy with, but there are a couple of things in this that I want to sort of pick up and discuss. There's some great suggestions, but actually putting them into practice didn't have the desired effect as far as I'm concerned when I came to do it. So I'll stop waffling now. You can watch the rest of the film and then read my blog if you're not already bored. Thank you very much.
Hello, it's Wednesday, it's 10 o'clock on Victoria Derbyshire. Good morning. Our exclusive story today, an investigation for this programme has found that more than £20 million was raised on crowdfunding sites last year for cancer treatment not available on the NHS.
You just think, where am I going to get that money from? Where am I going to get that money from? And it was like fundraising, crowdfunding page. It was just absolutely, it was draining.
Doctors and charities are warning that crowdfunding can put families under even more pressure when they're at their most vulnerable.
So this £20 million figure gets used quite a lot. I don't know how accurate it is, but the reason the charities are concerned is because £20 million going directly to those people fundraising is £20 million not going to the charities, and they all have overheads and staff costs. Some of their overheads and staff costs are actually an incredibly large proportion of the money that they raise, so the money that they actually have to use for charitable purposes is a lot less. And when quite a few of the smaller charities don't raise a great deal every year, £20 million going direct to people who are fundraising is not a good thing for them. So they're definitely concerned, but not necessarily for the right reasons. I don't know why doctors are concerned. It's probably because they just care for us all.
And the biggest of them all, GoFundMe, says it's changing its website in the light of our investigation. Have you crowdfunded for cancer treatment abroad? Do let us know. Let us know how much you raised and also whether it was worth it.
So they're using these pieces of journalism to essentially force GoFundMe, where I had my original crowdfunder on, and I've got another one on now, to change their rules to blacklist clinics. And I think where the case is proven that might be a good thing, but in this case, these pieces are incredibly biased against the clinic, and to the point where they've actually missed people out who, like myself, who have given positive reviews of the clinic in order to just give a completely unevidenced biased account of the clinic. And I'm not really happy that GoFundMe are being forced to change their rules, because I don't see why people should be stopped crowdfunding for something they want to do. They ought to get better advice before starting, but stopping them completely just because Victoria Derbyshire doesn't like a specific clinic, to be honest, I think that's railroading. I think GoFundMe have been duped a bit here. I'm not sure they've got the full story. I've tried to get in touch with them, but I'm just a guy crowdfunding on their website and paying their fees. They don't really want to speak to me.
Before all that, Anita has the news.
So this is how they present their stories. They start off with, Anita has the news, and they head across and they do it like the 6 o'clock news basically, and they'll give a couple of real news stories, put their exclusive story in, and then give a couple of real news stories. So if you're not the sort of person that questions the sources of things and how accurate they are, this is just being shown as a piece of national news. And to be honest, I think that's a bit misleading, but it's just my view.
Thank you, Victoria. Good morning, everyone. The Home Secretary, Sajid Javid, is meeting police chiefs from 7 forces most affected by violent crime. He's facing calls to treat a series of fatal stabbings as a national emergency. Last night, a teenager was charged with the murder of Yusuf Maki, the 17-year-old boy who was stabbed to death in Greater Manchester on Saturday. A man has also been arrested in connection with the murder of a 17-year-old girl, Jodie Chesney, in East London on Friday. More than £20 million was raised on crowdfunding sites last year for cancer treatment not available on the NHS. An investigation for this programme has found. The amount has been rising, sharply driven by the growth of social media campaigns and an increase in overseas clinics.
Increasing number of clinics. Well, I don't know if that's true. Germany's always had clinics like this. They have a slightly less regulated system than the UK. And when they say treatment not available on the NHS, that's a quick statement of a very, very complex issue. Treatment that is available on the NHS, and I'll cover this in my blog. I'm not going to sit and waffle up on it here.
But there are fears from doctors and charities that the rise in crowdfunding can put vulnerable families under even more pressure and rob them of precious time with their dying relatives.
You've got to really sit down and as a family and say to yourself, if we do this and we end up destitute with nothing and it doesn't work, where are we going to be? And that is the most important, terrifying, ridiculous decision that you're ever going to make in your life.
Now, this is the first appearance by someone who I think has misrepresented her story. And she actually makes some quite good points in this. But over the 2 pieces, what she says and what actually happened in her case and that of her daughter are not necessarily the same thing, in my opinion. In fact, I'll evidence that, to be perfectly honest. Now, this is going to be quite difficult to do because it shouldn't be forgotten that this lady has lost her daughter to cancer, and that's got to be unpleasant for any mother. Her daughter was only in her 20s and has left a small child behind her, and that's absolutely awful. And her daughter's story is just tragic. However, there are aspects of what she says in this and the second piece that don't actually match what happened, and so I think it should be clear what happened in that case. I've never actually met them, but I have had contact with the lady here. I think she refers on her GoFundMe to mummy claws, and I've felt the effect of those mummy claws. I'm not doing this to try and get back at her because I feel, incredibly. I really do. I feel incredibly sorry for her. But I still think this needs to be discussed, and I appreciate some people won't agree with me doing it.
That's a summary of the main news today. Back to you, Victoria.
Thank you very much. So let's bring you our exclusive story today. More than £20 million was raised on crowdfunding sites last year for cancer treatment not available here on the NHS, an investigation for this programme has found. The amount has been rising sharply each year, driven by access to overseas clinics and the growth of social media campaigns. But there are fears from doctors and charities that the rise of crowdfunding can put families under even more pressure when they're at their most vulnerable. And in the light of our investigation, the largest crowdfunding site, the US-based GoFundMe, tells us it's going to start directing cancer patients and their families to scientific advice on treatments.
So, scientific advice on treatments, and that's an excellent suggestion. The people should be more informed. But the difficulty is, who is going to inform them? Because it's very, very difficult to get independent, informed advice on current and particularly new treatments that are not necessarily fully through trials. And you might think, you should never have those. But I'm dying of cancer. I don't need safeguarding. Tessa Jowl asked for experimental treatments to be made available for terminally ill patients. If there's something that I think has a good chance of saving me, in my body it goes. no matter how much quackery other people think it is. And that attitude has kept me alive today. But independent scientific advice, I actually have found it very difficult to do that. Cancer Research UK is not independent. The NHS can only talk to you about what he can talk to you about. Your oncologist's hands are tied. He can't talk to you about things that are not authorised for your use, although they might, and he can't officially discuss things with you that are not normal treatments. There's a certain thing called the Cancer Act, I think it's 1950, which restricts people talking about treatment for cancer in this country. You can actually get treatment in this country now, but nobody advertises in case they fall foul of these laws. It's very difficult to find. So I kind of question where they're going to go for independent advice. And me personally, I like to check my sources, and I would have to take a view on whether that advice I was being given was independent. And I don't think everyone is capable of doing that.
Our reporter Jim Reid has this exclusive film.
I'm terrified, if I'm completely honest. I've had 20 cycles of chemotherapy now. I think realistically, we're looking for a miracle.
This is what life can now look like after a cancer diagnosis.
Got the ferry at Dover. We went over France, Belgium, Netherlands, into Germany. 11-hour journey in an ambulance.
Millions are being raised online for treatments, often unproven and untested.
Now, this is something I take as being just a sweeping statement. If you're going to say that the treatments are, let me just check my notes, unproven and untested, you need to show some evidence that the treatments being received are unproven and untested, because that certainly wasn't the case in my case, and isn't in a lot of people who go there. The treatment plans that they give people there, to my knowledge, they certainly were for me, were based on academic medical papers. They might not have gone through full trials, but for me, and for the doctors there, there's enough evidence, documented evidence, to give these treatments to everyone. My treatment was fully explained to me because, as you probably know by now, I'm a complete pedant, and I want to know what people are putting inside me. And I want to know what it's for and what it's going to do and how it's going to work. And so I made sure, I didn't fully understand it all because I'm not a doctor, but I understand enough of it to work out how the treatment they were giving me was working together to fight my cancer and why they were giving me it. Unproven and untested is just a sweeping statement as far as I'm concerned, unless you back that up with some evidence.
Without the public's donations and her donations, I think it'd be a total different story.
But with this new form of funding comes a new type of pressure. Helen lives in the hills in Lancashire. Her daughter Gemma was diagnosed with ovarian cancer in 2014. She was pregnant and put off treatment until she gave birth.
Gemma was extremely poorly. She was absolutely exhausted, obviously, from having the baby anyway. Backwards and forwards to the hospital, it was just madness.
For a while, chemotherapy worked, but then Gemma fell ill again. She was told nothing more could be done on the NHS.
I just thought, well, that's not happening. I'm not losing her. She's 28 years old. She's got a baby of her own. I need to do something, and that's when I started looking for alternative treatments, whether it was in this country or anywhere else in the world for that matter. And I just jumped on the internet and started researching.
And that's pretty much what we all do, jump on the internet and start researching. But different people have different levels of research skills. I don't know what Helen's are like, but I do know her story, and I will talk about it later on. But again, she makes some good points there. But she's a fairly classic case. I'm going to talk about types of patients at the Hallwang, probably without naming any because it's not really fair. But one of them is the patient dragged by the relative. There are a number of different types. Well, maybe not dragged, but the patient where all the treatment and all the action is being driven by a relative who desperately wants to save them. And the thing becomes much more emotive than finding some treatment and trying to get it.
Until recently, terminal cancer patients had few treatment options. Now the choice can be overwhelming, from private doctors in the UK to drug trials and clinics abroad.
Are you seeing a rise in people coming to you asking about treatment overseas?
Without doubt. Because our internet doesn't have boundaries, doesn't have geographical boundaries, and if you can see a treatment in Germany, you can go and find out about that. And of course, you can't believe that there's no such thing. What do you mean there's no treatment? We can get a man to the moon. Of course you can find something that can extend my life. We just can't believe that's the case. So our ability to go and find out more about that is accelerated.
Those are great points from Sarah Linsell. She knows what she's talking about clearly. She, as she says, it's really difficult to believe there's no treatment options for you. I certainly didn't believe it. I suppose I could sit here and say, and I was right. But that's not the point. I didn't believe it. And I tried, initially, complementary therapies with decent anecdotal evidence. It was about after I was told I was terminally ill and sent home, it was at least a year before I actually found a treatment that was evidenced, that had evidence that it had a good, and I mean a good chance of working on me. But I don't know what, what she says is you can get on the internet and you can start rummaging around and you can find something that you think might work and then just head off and get it. And she's quite right, really. Some really good points from Sarah.
Gemma wanted access to immunotherapy drugs not approved for NHS use.
Now, this is the first appearance of a comment that drives me absolutely up the wall. And that comment is not approved for NHS use, because it does a couple of things. First of all, it tries to put the NHS in an authoritative position on leading cancer care. And trust me, they are not in that position. They're a long way behind other countries and they move glacially slow at authorising treatments. And it's also a term that you need to understand how things are authorised for treatment. They're authorised on the basis of each treatment for every single individual type of cancer there is. My cancer started here on my head. It's squamous cell carcinoma and it metastasised. It's classed as a skin cancer, but it started on the outside of my head. If it had started in my ear, or up my nose or in my mouth, it would be classed as head and neck cancer. And for head and neck cancer, the drug that I went to Germany for would be available to me on the NHS because it's authorised for use. But it's not authorised for use on my form of cancer, despite the fact that head and neck squamous cell carcinoma and cutaneous squamous cell carcinoma are not that dissimilar. I'm not going to say they're exactly the same because, to be perfectly honest, I'm not a scientist and I'm not a medical professional, but there's not a massive amount of difference to them. Yeah, and so if it works on one, the likelihood is it'll work on another. And as I say, I found evidence of the drug that I wanted being used on people with exactly my form of cancer very successfully. So not approved for NHS use is not necessarily a good standard to measure things by, in my opinion.
A private clinic in Germany said it could offer the treatment.
You're completely stressed out as it is. Like, well, how do I do that? How do I do that? Who do I ring? How do I get there? How am I going to do this? And then you've got the added pressure, which is the biggest pressure of all, which is where the hell are we going to get the money from to do this? Because once you realise what you've got to do, you've got to work out how you're going to pay for it.
That again is a really good point. Funding your treatment. People, as I say, I'll cover this in patient types, but I did see a few people who essentially went to the clinic with a bag of money and a lot of hope and not much clue what they were going to be treated with, what treatment they wanted, or how long the treatment was going to last. And I have to say that we went they're not quite sure how long we'd have to have treatment. And so the first thing we did was sit down and find out from the clinic, how much is it going to cost the first treatment, and what is the minimum length of treatment that I have to have for it to do me any good. And they told me 3 months. We worked out how much that was going to cost, and we looked at whether we had the money or could raise the money. And we were in a position where we pretty much knew we were fairly close with my personal pension and various other things I could sell. I had a very good Northern Soul record collection, very good. Not the best in the country, but very good. And it was worth about £40,000. And I couldn't ask people for money and not sell it. So my collection, which took me 30 years to put together, went in a year. But I'm still alive. I might not have those records and I'll never get them again, but I'm still alive. And so it was worth it. But actually funding the treatment is something that not a lot of people really consider, how they're going to get a full term of treatment and how they're going to fund it. They just go. And I've seen people turn up at the clinic expecting to be treated in 2 days and go home clear of cancer. That doesn't happen anywhere in the world. We're dealing with treating probably the most difficult thing to treat in the whole world here. So, Helen Sproats makes a very, very good point there. Very good point.
The family sold a house and took out loans. A crowdfunding campaign was started online, raising £16,000. The clinic, though, wanted £100,000 just to start treatment.
I don't know if you can see it. But
then an email arrived. Helen thought it was fake at first, from someone saying they worked for Kate Winslet.
Incredible. I feel so blessed that I could help. What do you say?
The actress who'd read Gemma's story raised money, and the publicity boosted crowdfunding from the public.
Now, I can't tell you how jealous I am that they managed to get a celebrity on board. But it's understandable because Gemma's story was absolutely tragic. Absolutely tragic. If you read it, and I did at the time, you couldn't fail to be moved by it and feel so sorry for the whole family. Kate Winslet's getting involved, and their fund went to, I think it's £350,000. Very, very quickly, relatively. And so they had £350,000, mostly of other people's money, to spend on a treatment, and I can't tell you how jealous I am of that. I wish I had, but mine was my own.
Gemma did make it to Germany, and for a while the treatment seemed to work.
When he says, at first it seemed to work, the clinic in Germany got Gemma to a point where the NHS told her she was NED, no evidence of disease, and that she didn't need any more treatment. The clinic actually disagreed. But that's not really what comes across. When it seemed to work, it actually got a NED, no evidence of disease. But that was a decision that the NHS made, not the clinic. I just want to be clear about these things.
Thank you so much for all your hard work and me being able to have my treatment that I really did need.
But in Gemma's case, any success was short-lived. The cancer came back. After 7 trips to that clinic, she died in the UK in October.
And that, again, is not exactly the full story. She may well have done 7 trips to the clinic, I don't know, to be perfectly honest. I could probably have a look at a funding campaign and find out. But the clinic got her to the point where the NHS said she was NED, and then they didn't bother going back to the clinic, despite the fact the clinic said, no, you should have maintenance treatment. So they didn't go back at all. The NHS said she needed no more treatment, so they didn't have any. And then 8 months later, her cancer came back. And I think they went back to the clinic. I'll have to check that. I think they went back to the clinic, but she was just too far gone for them to save her. So there's slightly more to this case than meets the eye. And I think it's wrong to blame the clinic for Gemma's death, because they actually didn't do a bad job on her. I'm sure I've got a couple of emails from Helen Sproats somewhere and a comment on my blog saying how wonderful it was. And if I have, I'll put them up here.
Don't want to come back.
Helen is very thankful for the support, both from Kate Winslet and the public, but says others need to think very hard before making a similar decision.
Everybody that we met over there, not one of them's here anymore.
And that's a fair point as well. A lot of the people that I met at the clinic are not here anymore either. Some got extra time, some got a lot of extra time. Some got extra time, some never responded at all to treatment, and some couldn't continue treatment because they didn't have the funding. And but that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with cancer. It's not an easy fix. I actually don't think there is a cure for cancer. I think it's manageable, and I think it's becoming more manageable. And I'd settle for that. I'd settle for managing my cancer and staying alive with a good quality of life. That'll be fine for me. If we could cure it, that'd be absolutely fantastic. But I actually don't think so. It's your own body that produces cancer cells. It's not something that you contract or you catch from somewhere else or invades your body. It's your own body doing it. And a lot of people die from cancer everywhere in the world. This is not people go to this clinic and die of cancer. A lot of people die from cancer everywhere in the world. It's not an easy fix. If it was, we wouldn't have this problem, would we?
And then there were a lot of people sold everything that they owned. They threw it at the kitchen sink at it. You've got to really sit down and as a family and say to yourself, if we do this and we end up destitute with nothing and it doesn't work, where are we going to be? And that is the most important, terrifying, ridiculous decision that you're ever going to make in your life.
This programme has found, over the last year, more than £20 million has been raised on crowdfunding sites for cancer treatment not available on the NHS. In some cases, that's helped pay for trials abroad or cutting-edge treatment at hospitals or universities. Charities then say crowdfunding can be a force for good, but there are real concerns about the pressure it can also put on families.
It's a new option, but in our experience, we have found that some families feel as though they have to do it. They feel pressurised into doing it because it's something that we've all heard of now, that we see it a lot on the internet. If you're a regular Facebooker, you've probably seen a fair old handful of children who need treatment. So for some families, it feels like an obligation that if you haven't tried this, are you a good parent? And that's a very, very difficult position to be in.
Again, more good points from Sarah Lindsell. Some people do go there with a rough idea of what treatment they think they want and no idea how they're going to fund it. They just go, and then the pressure they put on themselves is unbelievable. And so many people feel that they have to do it because other people are doing it. And it really needs some... You need to be cold, calm and calculating about the whole thing. And make sure you can afford it before you go. Because if you can't fund a full course of treatment there, it is a waste of time going. And I shall talk about types of patient. And she's talking about the type of patient where the relatives are attempting to save a patient because they think they should. Not because they think they can, but because they think they should. You get sort of a number of different types. I put them down. Fighting patients, and that's myself. I am a fighting patient. And they're the people who are most likely to stay alive because it's in you. You're fighting. You get fighting patients and fighting relatives together, and that's the dream team because the patient has the work shared, particularly if they get a community around them. But then you get into the sort of people trying to save their very close relatives. It's all understandable. I mean, it's a really difficult position people are put in. But they're not necessarily looking at it in a really cold, calm light. Is what I'm doing correct? Does my whatever relative really want this. We did see, and I'm not going to name them, and I'm not going to sort of try and embarrass them or anything like that, but we did see a couple of people, the odd one that I didn't even know who they were, who had clearly turned up with not much of a clue, and the patient just was sick of it. But they went through it, and the family ran around sorting stuff out left, right and centre for them, and actually it was just a bit where the patient was just sort of, more treatment, not a lot of fighting them. And there are a number of different types of patients. I'll discuss the types in my blog, but I don't think I'll start putting patients into those types because it's just cruel to their relatives and to patients to suggest that that's what they were doing. They say that everyone's reason for going there is slightly different, but a lot of people make a lot of the same mistakes about going there. But those mistakes, you could probably say that the clinic could manage them a bit better, but actually a lot of it comes down to the people who's made the decision to go, regardless of whether they know quite what they're doing and what they're taking on. And I'll cover that in the blog.
Other families we've spoken to also say they felt very uneasy posting photos online of their children, often very sick. But the harsh reality of crowdfunding is that it's often the most hard-hitting stories that raise the most money.
And these under my arms, you could feel them.
That has implications for people like Paul, a former army officer who served in Northern Ireland. Diagnosed with terminal skin cancer, he raised money from friends and family, but his wider crowdfunding campaign struggled.
I haven't got a story that grabs people. I was nearly 60 at the time. I've got no children, and not many dependents. Without having a really compelling story, you're not going to raise a lot of money on crowdfunding because there's just so many people trying to raise money and you disappear into it.
So that was my 30 seconds. 3 and a bit hours of filming and interviewing, and that was my 30 seconds. And I stand by what I said. If you haven't got a compelling story, and I mean really compelling, Gemma Nuttall's story was compelling. It was compelling for me. It was absolutely tragic. And to be that young and faced with the decision of having your child and possibly dying, or saving yourself but losing your child, that must be just awful to face. I was nearly 60, and I just want to stay alive because I've got things to do. And that pretty much came across from a crowdfunding, and it's like, 60-year-old bloke with cancer, there's plenty of you, mate. Everyone's got empathy for a story like Gemma, and quite rightly too. So that's something to bear in mind. You think, I'll crowdfund it. You need a good story to get outside all the other people crowdfunding. But what you've got to question is, why are they all crowdfunding? Why are they all having, or feel that they have, to go abroad to get cancer treatment? Why do they think that the cancer treatment in this country is not good enough? I'm not sure I can answer that, but it's something to consider.
When they say to you there's nothing more they can do, you want to battle on, you want to fight it.
Dave Greenwood is opening up shop in Stockport.
Because you do the Oscars at school, don't
This
you?
wedding events business was all his wife Heidi's idea.
She never took a wage from it. Up until the day she passed away, she never took a wage from it. And it was just amazing what she did.
Heidi died from cancer just a month before we filmed, leaving Dave, their son, and 5 other children.
It feels like your feet are stuck to the floor and you sink into the seat when you hear that word tumour. And you go, is it cancerous? And you're thinking then, how long's she got? What do we need to do now?
Dave had seen the news about Kate Winslet. At the time, Gemma's case was being widely reported as close to a miracle cure.
That's a key point, absolute key point. They're looking for a miracle cure. There isn't one, full stop. If you're lucky, and I've been lucky, the treatment worked on me, and if I could get it regularly, it would work on me still. But I'm being refused funding for it, and up until this year I was pretty much refused treatment with it unless I go back to the clinic. That's treatment in the UK, because if treatments aren't authorised for use on you, nobody will give you them. Never mind, the NHS won't. The doctors in the UK work privately and for the NHS, and they don't want to risk either thing, but they're all controlled by the same organisations. And a couple of people, and I'll put an example in my blog, have been threatened with being struck off for giving people new cancer treatments, new, very promising, very well evidenced cancer treatments that are not authorised for use. But going off in search of a miracle cure, if that's what you think you're going to get, you're not. I can tell you that for nothing. You might be lucky, but you need to research it all first. Another key point there is that the press who have all followed up on this story and said how terrible the clinic is, well, it's the second piece, but they're getting towards that, are also responsible for publicising a lot of successful campaigns like Gemma's. And that's what pushes people to do it. Well, if it worked for her, it could work for us. And I'll come on to false hope later, because I think it's an odd concept. But that's what puts the seed in their minds, not the clinic. What puts their seed in the seed in their minds of miracle cure, we can cure our relative, child, mother, whatever, of cancer. What puts the seed in their mind is the press that are now currently, I'll show you in my blog, that a number of people that followed up on this story have also spent their time publicising people's going to this clinic, which encourages other people to go to this clinic. So they're not entirely unresponsible for the situation, in my opinion.
Yeah, trying to these up.
He wanted the same treatment in Germany that he hoped could save his wife's life.
You just think, where am I going to get that money from? Where am I going to get that money from? And it was like fundraising, crowdfunding page, and it was just hard work. How can I put it? It was draining.
Dave says his first quote from the clinic was £75,000. When they got to Germany, he says they were told to come back every 3 weeks at a cost of £39,000 a time.
And that again is something that's been brought up by patients before, knowing what the initial cost of the first treatment is, and somehow thinking that's going to be the only cost, and then finding out that actually you need more than one treatment. But if you research the treatment you think you need, as I did, and I'm not trying to be smart about that, I'm just saying I did, you'll get a good understanding of how long this treatment needs to go on till. And actually, because some of the things are not fully in use everywhere, but there's good evidence that they will work on certain cancers, the knowledge of how long you have to be treated is pretty poor everywhere in the world. People just do not know. And so we were told 3 months. That's what we did. We tried to fund it. I don't know Dave Greenwood. I never came across him at the clinic. I don't want to comment on his story. But I will say I'm so pleased I wasn't put in that position having to raise the money every 3 weeks, because not having to do that, using my personal pension, took a lot of pressure off me. I knew that I could pretty much, I wasn't sure how long it would go on, and I thought if it goes on much longer, I'm not going to be able to afford this. But if I can do the minimum, I've shown it works, because it was working when we decided to continue it. I've shown it works, and surely someone's going to be interested. Not necessarily. But I would not like to be in that position, and I met a few patients in the same position who were trying to raise money every 3 weeks, and if they raised it they could go for treatment, and if they didn't raise it they couldn't go for treatment. But again, I don't think that's the clinic's fault. I think perhaps they could manage it slightly better, and I'll come on to that in the second piece a bit more. And I'm taking up some of these points with the clinic because I think they're fair points, but I still think the clinic gets a bit of a bad do, certainly out the second piece, not necessarily out this. But from crowdfunding points of view, I would say anyone who's thinking of crowdfunding for their treatment, you need to have a definite idea that treatment's got a good chance of working, and you need to definitely know how long it lasts before you even get on the plane. Never mind start raising money. Before you even decide to go, you need to have a really good understanding of what it is you're going for.
you're trying to focus on your family, but then in the back of your mind you've got £39,000 to try and raise to get her back there, and you're looking at it and it's like a time bomb, and it's going and going and going.
Thousands were raised online. Dave took money out of the business and friends made their own donations, but in the end it just wasn't enough.
She didn't manage to get back on the 10th of September because we just didn't get enough funds in to do it.
And how did you feel about not going back?
I wanted to get back there. Everyone stepped up to try and raise money, and everyone was sharing the crowdfunding page, and you could see there was days where you get £500 in, there was days where you get nothing in, and you're just thinking, we're not going to get there, and we're not going to get there, and then you're just thinking, stop being stupid, you've got to plod on, you've got to keep going.
It's incredibly stressful, Dave.
It is, and we didn't even have near to the 39,000 to get back there.
Heidi's one trip to Germany cost around £75,000. Elsewhere in Europe, Turkish clinics are popular. For childhood cancers, it's Mexico or the US.
We're talking £100,000, £200,000, £300,000. I mean, it's an awful lot of money for anyone. I guess the question is, can it be justified?
Would you put a value on a child's life? Never. A cynic might question why all of the clinics seem to charge roughly the same amount of money to provide very, very different treatments. So it's almost as if some clinics have worked out this is the right amount, or the amount that most families would pay.
Now, I found that comment a bit odd, that all the clinics charging the same amount of money for different treatments, because that's not my experience at all. I'd really like to have seen some evidence of that, and possibly there is, but we haven't seen it. My experience is only at the Hallwang Clinic. I haven't been anywhere else. But we in our Facebook group, we've discussed costs, and whether they're right, whether they're wrong, whether they're fair, because it's a lot of money. And we discussed costs, and we found that everyone was actually paying massively different prices, not for the same things, but for their different treatments. Some people were paying, £300,000 or £400,000. If I were to say the money that just went on treatment and staying at the clinic for me, it was £160,000 over 3 months, which is less than other people paid, but possibly more than some, I don't know. But that's how much the rest of us getting there, flying there, hotels, because you stay in hotels and then go to the clinic to try and save a bit of money. The cost, as I've found, was not the same for different treatments. So I'd really like to have seen some evidence of that, and I don't think we did. Okay, so as expected, I've talked far too much through this piece, so I'm going to have to split it into 2 or possibly 3 separate films and run them as a playlist on YouTube, because they're just too big to go on there. They just take too long. So this is the end of the first part of the first piece that went out on Victoria Derbyshire show about crowdfunding, and it should automatically start the second part afterwards, but it's on the same channel, so you can carry on and have a look. Thanks.